Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rachel Latham with the Ability People. And this afternoon, I am joined by Project X partners, Marian O'Brien and Simone Hauser. The life after lockdown phase will be a critical time for businesses to reboot their organisations and try and return to some level of sustainable performance. However, that success will be largely driven by the people in the company, how the organizational culture has survived, and how it is reignited. And we're going to focus on how lockdown has affected both people and organizational culture, as well as how things will change as restrictions are lifted, hopefully over time. Also, let's not forget, the main reason we are talking today is to raise money for the NHS and its key workers during the COVID-19 outbreak. The last few months have been a difficult time for many, and we encourage the audience to please donate throughout. I'm now going to throw it over to our panelists to further introduce themselves. Marian, do you want to start?
Thanks a lot, Rachel. Thanks very much, first of all, for inviting us along. So I'll introduce myself very briefly and hand off to Simone to do the same. So I am one of the co-founders of Project X, along with Julia, Sarah and Simone. And we started earlier this year, actually, so great timing in terms of launching a boutique consultancy. My background is 30 plus years working in a variety of global organizations and locations in that people, talent and engagement space as a coach, facilitator and designer of training. We as an organization have a real kind of passion around agile values and principles, which is something that we integrate into what we do. I'm Irish originally, live in London these days. And my own little challenge, which will probably not just for me, but generally a challenge that a lot of people have had, is I'm an extrovert, and the challenge of coping in socially distancing culture at the moment has brought some interesting challenges along. And otherwise, little things about me: love creativity, love innovation, have a passion for travel and arts and photography. But most importantly, I love working with people and organizations to help them kind of get the most out of what they're doing.
Well, we'll get on just fine. I love working with people too. So, Simone, what about yourself?
Thanks so much, Rachel. My name is Simone Hauser. I have also, like Marian, over 30 years of experience in the people, change and culture space. Started probably with more a mergers and acquisition background. So I've merged into the people world with a bankruptcy. And overnight had to like save people's jobs and livelihood. So as that was not as big as what we are living right now, some of these emotions we're going through, I had similar ones to deal with in all these like mergers and acquisitions situations. Also kind of love learning and ongoing learning, and had the fortune over the couple of decades to help people learn and build things together with people, as well as influenced very much through the adaptive leadership lens in Harvard. As Marian had said, we co-founded Project X, very excited, working together with four brilliant experts around culture. And so, that's really like engaging for us, while we have like worked also as a team in lockdown. Originally from probably hear that, I'm from Germany, and living over 16, 17 years now in the UK. What the lockdown meant for me, I'm a mother, so the value of emptied toilet paper rolls and emptied egg boxes, which we then finally got, was amazing. So I went back to my childhood, like created all these lovely things which you can do out of egg boxes, which was a great things to do with the little ones. Really focused on family life, but also to kind of make sure I've used the time wisely, upskilled heavily on a couple of things, specifically on the agile space. So while that was quite stressful, I thought that was a brilliant time. I've never will have that time again. So yeah, over the last 6-7 weeks, ensured that I have a couple of more basically certifications under my belt, and my co-founders too. A little bit more about me. What I love is traveling. I did a round the world trip to immerse myself in Asian and Latin American culture, which was a huge thing for me to do. Spend a whole year out there. Unthinkable now, but I'm very grateful that I was able to do that. And I love just to support people on their journey, and specifically, this is why it was exciting to talk to you now, is it is important to kind of get that right mindset in terms of where we want to go next after living through and that we are in this pandemic.
Absolutely, and we will be touching on not only what it's been like during lockdown, but how we can at some point transition into the next stage. But I mean, Marian, you said right from the top that it's Project X is actually a very new and fresh business. I mean, how much interest have you had from leaders and HR directors in the last couple of months wanting support and advice?
It's actually been really busy. Between us, we have quite an extensive network from the organizations that we've either worked in before as permanent employees or as consultants and contracting. So we have had this amazing network that we have been able to stay connected with and offer support to. As well as building, as Simone was saying, we are members of a variety of different communities around culture, around people, around talent development. And it's been a wonderful global learning experience as well, with people selfishly in the service of others offering seminars and conferences virtually, events like this, which is amazing. That has allowed us to actually start even building new networks and collaboration opportunities. So the advantage we've been able to take of is, whilst we haven't had to be out there physically delivering, we've actually been able to have a lot of conversations with people, virtual coaching sessions as well. The training that we attend, that's a community of about 50 people globally, very diverse, that we have been collaborating with. And also, a few of us, Project X, we're actually contributing to a book at the moment as well as part of Agile People. So we're writing chapters for that. So for us as a business, it's been actually a really great and unfortunate live case study of a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ambiguity for people and organizations, which has been a great opportunity for us to be able to step in and support and help them, for sure.
And would probably say also to the question, certainly what I've seen, I don't know if those of you who listen have heard about the Kübler-Ross change curve. It's probably something really to look at. I'm certainly use it specifically right now. It's talking about the denial phase, the anger phase, the depression phase, the bargaining phase, and then acceptance phase. So 5 different steps and how you emotionally react to that. And Rachel, to your question, I certainly have seen those phases of the Kübler-Ross change curve towards the client engagement we had. So in the initial first week was really shock. So the denial, what's happening here. So interesting, we got a lot of conversations from individuals reaching out to us, as Marian said, right? So we've done a lot of coaching linked back to the Kübler-Ross change curve. This is very normal that you're so much shocked. And specifically on that phase, it was the leaders who had to deal with so many things at that point in terms of looking at the client needs. How are we going to do that? Looking at staff, how can they work from home? How can we make sure that somehow our processes keep alive in this situation? But the thing which was most interesting for us and where we supported most was the leaders themselves, because they had that whole extra change on their shoulders. But a lot of time these were people, or mostly people, then they're not recognizing that they also need something. And specifically on the emotional side, it is very it is a shock, and it isn't, all the fears and anxiety, everything comes out, and helping that support that is really normal was very present in that first phase. And I would say after 2 to 3 weeks, we realized the anger and depression side. Again, it was more on the individual side, where people really looked into, well, what does it actually mean? What does distancing mean? And there was a difference between the types. So I'm more the introvert. I didn't have any problem to stay at home and, you know, get into my own little shell. Where we heard from Marian, Marian had different experiences and invented book clubs and wine clubs, and, you know, it was lovely to see that. She can talk a bit more about that. And then the other thing which I thought in that second phase came up is really the connection tools. And there is lovely new tools which I personally also didn't see around. You know, we're using one now, Zoom or Microsoft, the Microsoft Teams. There are lovely things like Trello or Mural, or things people have never seen before, but they're using it now and they can work connecting with each other on that. Then I would say from week 5, there was a shift from the individual more to companies. It was really like a little bit like, okay, we're as an individual, we have moved now, and we got more questions around future. So I facilitated some sessions around, you know, what is our future? What is our planning? You know, is our brand still the right one? What's our purpose? You know, with this shift of, you know, do we need to change something? And it's also interesting here, the shift from individual tasks that people take in a team to really the team being asked in terms of, so what do you think? What shall we do? You know, what's the next? So there's a real shift from that individual to the collective in some companies. And we've been more asked to facilitate these conversations. So yeah, and I think we're in that bargaining acceptance stage now from the Kübler-Ross curve. So yeah, that's an interesting one. So I'm expecting also what we see in much more organizational discussion and support in the next couple of weeks.
And both of you have touched on agile methodologies. Can you go into a bit more detail about what that looks like and what that mindset looks like when you're trying to help organizations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, agile is a set of values and principles for how organizations kind of set themselves up and move forward. And within that, it has some really great tools that you can leverage. And certainly those tools we have found ourselves coaching people on, or even using them ourselves. So, you know, a key value of agile is about people first. So what we found is, you know, spending time with our kind of network and with our clients, giving them that space and opportunity to think about their people. So how do they want to connect with their people? You know, what support are they looking for as leaders? It's really important, as Simone touched on as well, that, you know, we help them metaphorically, I guess, apply their own oxygen mask before helping others, you know, to use that flying analogy, which an expression we probably haven't heard for a while and probably won't for a while getting on a plane. But that kind of idea of, okay, let's think about the people, let's kind of prioritize what's important. So, you know, setting up working from home opportunities for people, the supporting technologies to go with that. Thinking about mindfulness and how we check in with our colleagues on a regular basis. And that's not just about the responsibility of managers and leaders of people. Actually, we all have that collective responsibility. And then some other kind of, one of our partners, Sarah Bowman, she was also sharing with us, she has 2 children at home, and her husband and herself were working from home. And they set up a family Kanban board. Now, a Kanban board, for those who don't know what it is, at a very simple level, it's 3 columns of what we need to do, what we're doing, and what's done. So you can kind of have a very visual track of activity. And they sit down as a family and kind of think about, okay, what do we need? What are we going to do as a family this week? And then they can move, the children in particular, take great pleasure in moving the post-it notes along the little virtual Kanban board as they participate in the family activities. And it also allows a collective kind of discussion in the family around how their week's going. It allows Sarah and her husband to check in with how their children are getting on. And Julia, our other partner, Julia Powell, she's also done something very similar with her children. And it also allows them, so one of the other kind of tools in Agile is around having retros or retrospectives. So taking that to a family situation, you know, at the end of the week or the end of the day, just checking in with the family and kind of going, hey, how's everybody doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down. And allows for that kind of emotional conversation to take place and a real check-in with people and how they're progressing on the journey. And in organizations, and certainly we've used a lot of those visual tools. So we've used, you know, Trello in that kind of a way, or Mural, as Simone has said. So I think it's been one of the other kind of principles in Agile is very much around experimenting. So that's something that we've been doing as a company as well, experimenting with different technologies or, you know, the designs of events. So we're spending a bit of time at the moment looking at some of the training that we offer that we would normally do face-to-face with people. How can we bring that online so that participants can still continue to feel supported and get development, but in a way that aligns to the kind of challenges that they're facing home. So done a lot in that space, and sometimes it really has gone back to the basics as well, just reminding people to, you know, check in that emotional connection with people, how people are feeling, you know, bringing that emotional language into the conversation. And we've also heard stories and seen it, we've experimented it, or seen it ourselves, where, you know, in the beginning, we've seen some senior leaders and stakeholders that we're talking to, you know, still turn up with their jacket and their tie on. And then week 2, the jacket was gone and the tie was gone. And by this stage, you know, they're in T-shirts and they're showing us their dog and saying, have you met my dog? You know, so what we've also seen is this lovely kind of emotional, vulnerable, or transparency journey that a lot of leaders have gone on. And we've heard some great anecdotal stories of board members, you know, kind of showing up like that with their peers and with their teams and organizations. So there's been something in terms of that human journey, which is really important, whether it's about colleagues or clients, that has actually been something that we've been kind of supporting quite a few people on, and given that mindfulness support as well. So there's some of the things. Simone's got a few other kind of thoughts, I'm sure, on that to chip in.
Yeah, one of the things is probably also timeline, which why this is so working quite well where we are right now. So you look in when you look from an agile perspective, you look at smaller chunks to achieve something, which at the moment, this is exactly what we're like seeing, right? You can't plan for 3 months or 6 months, right? You can maybe plan for a week or sometimes even for the day. And that way of working is very much an agile way of working. So you look at small little goals, but they're much easier to achieve. And so coming what Marian just said, they're called sprints in the agile. It's a whole language around it, but it doesn't matter. For me, it's really the mindset of people really experiencing that at the moment. But if from a mindset perspective, if you kind of train to do 6 months, 12 months look ahead, we see a lot of company at the moment saying, you know, I can't do that, and they can't, and that's okay, right? And from an agile perspective, it's just you can define as much as you can at this point to this time. And the key thing from a company perspective is actually your purpose. So what you're helping to the world, what you're helping to the customer, and you know how you're doing that with your people, with your team. And I think that's the 2 key pieces. And like how you work this out is an experiment, which everybody at the moment does. It's called agile, but that's the experience, and being more conscious about that. And that's, I think, what I talked about a little bit, the phase with right now, being conscious what we've done, what was the fun parts, what actually worked, right? So for example, one of the clients I talked about was, well, there was only one person who did one certain task, but now we realize we need to buddy up people, because if somebody is ill or if somebody doesn't have a Wi-Fi connection for one reason, right? We need to make sure at least 2 people are. So there are certain little processes which people understand, oh, this really will help us on a longer term. And that is, in a way, the agile way of working. And a lot of people are probably doing it already, but it's more bringing it more to the consciousness and how you can maximize further. The more you use more as a team, as an organization, you become more mature, and therefore can focus then on other things or can focus your energy on other things.
I mean, we're all clearly very naturally positive people, and as you talk about working from home, you do make it sound like quite a positive thing, but a phrase I've heard a lot is people aren't working from home in a way we've always known it to be. People are at home during a global pandemic trying to work. And there is a difference between, in January, if I said, I'm just going to work from home today, that is a very different attitude to today, where I'm forced to work from home, and am I actually working the same way I was? So what advice would you have for people who are feeling less positive about this situation? Marian?
It's so true, and it also depends on lots of practical things, whether you have enough of the technology at home. There's a lot of families that probably only had one computer, and now there's 2 or 3 people in the house, plus you've got homeschooling activities that require technology. You've got the challenges around Wi-Fi capabilities, space in the rooms. We've heard great stories where people have to share the Wi-Fi, because if everybody's on it, it means nobody's having a good experience of it. So distributing up times of the day when people get access to it. And I think in the beginning, certainly a couple of people that I was talking to, and those managers who maybe weren't necessarily big supporters of working from home, were probably a little bit more cynical about what people would get done, and maybe still had similar expectations of productivity. And the reality is we can't, and everyone's having a very different experience of this. And what is crucial is that we check in with people. We understand what's working for them, what's not working for them, what additional support can we give. We've heard great stories from some of our clients as well, where they've had members of their teams kind of say, I need to apply for holiday next week because I'm not able to kind of do an 8-hour day. And those managers, thankfully, these certainly a couple of the ones we've been talking to, and there's probably the extreme out there as well, but those managers say, no, this isn't about taking time off. This is about just do what you can and just tell us how more we can support you. So there's definitely a responsibility on leaders and managers of their teams working from home to do those check-ins, find out what needs to happen, but give people permission to kind of manage their time, their space at home in a way that works for them. And I think the reality that a lot of managers having to work from home for the first time has forced that as well, because they've had to face it. They have families that they have to support, homeschooling that they've had to manage, get out for some exercise. So because those managers have had to step into that experience for themselves, I think it's probably given a greater appreciation. However, there are extremes. There's definitely certain roles where the challenge of working from home or connecting with people, getting access to files and systems is just not there. And we just that kind of check in, see how people are getting on with it, and being realistic. And Simone talked about doing things in sprints. The main thing that I would encourage people to do is seek counsel and seek help, share. And that's can be quite brave as well for people who normally are probably seen as in control and always have everything working smoothly when they're in the office. And now they're working from home with 2 or 3 children in the background, and, maybe even issues that, in the parental challenges. And really it's around encouraging individuals to take time out for themselves and to reflect in that moment and have a look at what has been successful, breaking things down into, okay, success yesterday was I got these few things done. Today I can try and do the things I didn't get done yesterday. But give yourself a break. Everyone is facing this for the first time. None of us have the answers. So doing that bit of self-reflection, seeking out some good kind of support and help from people, whether that's colleagues, or reaching out to your managers in the office. And that's what I've certainly in the first weeks I was encouraging through people that I've worked with who were reaching out for advice on that and giving them that kind of advice that it's okay to be, it's always okay to be vulnerable and be open and ask for help, but more so now because people have less time with you, so we have less opportunities to really physically see how people are getting on. So we have these moments where we really do need to just check in, ask how people are getting on, and then see what we can do to help and support each other, and just expect that the pace of things is different at the moment, and to learn from it and see it hopefully as a learning opportunity.
And I think there what you said, Marian, just be open, right? And I think, for example, out of when Marian started to kind of articulate her, her need to kind of talk to people as an extrovert, and then kind of looked into ways of doing that. That was kind of the start, even within our little team, to kind of see, what is actually going on with all of us. And as an introvert, it's probably just coming quite. You can hold you can hold that together much longer than probably an extrovert, but I encourage also all of you who might be more an introvert to really look into, what does this do with you? And I certainly felt there was a point in this 2-3 week window where you had to really make a mental shift in terms of when you kind of read all of the news, when you kind of look at the news, they are all confusing because they're all different kind of messages coming across, specifically if you look beyond the UK. So, if you look also into some of the European or Asian news. So to kind of really make sure that your kind of in itself your can work, it's important to kind of stay, make yourself happy in terms of like, what did I achieve? There's always something you have achieved, or you talked with a friend, or you kind of made sure, you brought somebody to laugh. I certainly reached out to businesses or people I know who were on their own or were maybe in a more vulnerable category. And even that is kind of, that is very something positive. So I think somebody can find something positive a day and really focus on that. So focus on your strength. Don't focus on, on the negative side, because the negativity is very, very heavily around it. That's what I felt. So it's really that mental shift. And we certainly, the coaching I've done the last couple of weeks was really kind of helping leader to kind of detect that and make sure that their teams talk about what they've done really well, which is not normally how we do business, right? Normally you just focus on, we have to do this and we have to kind of be better in this and we compete against each other. And this is not what this is all about. So I feel it's a very different norm. And people maybe who are, are having a certain way how they want to kind of achieve something are struggling with that. But I can encourage you, just see it as an experience, see it as something else. And it's an opportunity to find out how we are, how you, what's triggering you. And I certainly had a lot of learning and luckily could kind of share that with others. So that is the key if you're in a business or if you, as an individual.
And Simone, you've obviously spoken there about how people clearly are kind of getting used to this lifestyle and this way of work. But at some point, people will start to transition back to work. What advice have you been given to people that are thinking about that transition back to work? And how have you been advising organizations to put certain measures and changes into place?
I think the key is really kind of don't do it in a dark room, right? The key is, as you've done the last 5, 6, 7 weeks now, talk with your employees, talk with your clients, right? Because it is very different and it depends also where people are located. But certainly for those clients we advise, and this is, by the way, called agile, but it's, this is just the natural way of doing it, right? So you anyway had check in with your staff or with your customers and check in and find out, what worked, what didn't work, what would you like different. And what we've heard, and I always say, C19 was a catalyst also for digitalization, right? Because the tools are there, but we didn't know about it or we didn't use it. Some business did, some business didn't. So it certainly brings questions up. And I think you can't generally say, this is exactly it. I think the key thing for me is that people look into their customers, talk with them, interview them, find out what worked, and then talk with their team. What worked, what didn't work, what shall we keep? Where are your fears? And then work through the fears. And I think people have different risk appetites, or depending also what you have lived through in life, right? You either more on, well, I don't really want to go out and I feel uncomfortable, to, well, I lived other things through, so this is only one of them and I can, we're getting out of this. So I think in discussing that as humans, when we're discussing things in a collective, you hear different ideas, you have kind of different views, you hear them, and then you can kind of over time help yourself to kind of go to a new norm. It definitely is a new norm, and I think that's what we're seeing. We're offering a lot of facilitation. As I said before, it goes really as far as the strategy. Some businesses are actually putting new brands out because they feel they are different now and they want to kind of really manifest that even in a brand. A lot of businesses looking at their digitalization strategy and have done it or already now pushing that forward. And then looking with employee what that means. And I think there's certainly 3 areas I see it. One is location is less important now, because people feel, if I'm two hours away from London, it worked, I can work from home, so we can do that, right? That is possible, so that gives choices for people. I've certainly heard a lot in my network, or in our collective network, that people said, I don't actually need to kind of stay in a certain town because I proved now I can work from home. And then the second one is really about the team and kind of looking at team structure and going away from that individual kind of focus, you do this, you do that, to, okay, what can we do as a team and who can take up what and what's left to do, that type of conversation. And the third one is really the leaders' change of how they kind of navigated through this process. Their discussion, their encouragement is really, really key. And trying it out, experimenting, what works, what doesn't work, right? Yeah.
I think adding a couple of little bits to that, certainly organizations that are just bringing their people together, leaders, managers, bringing their people together and having those kind of resilience type conversations about, and inviting input, inviting ideas from everybody as to how do we prepare to go back when we go back. And I hate that expression, go back, because actually we've carried on working. So, we've heard about a program that's been titled Preparing to Go Back to Work. It's like, we've all been working. It's just the environment in which we've been working, it has changed. So certainly helping kind of organizations think about that resilience piece. There's also been, there's been some amazing pivotal collaborations and new and kind of not necessarily new inventions but new solutions to problems as well, and that's really interesting and exciting, because this has kind of shaken us out of our comfort zones, and with that actually creativity and innovation, you see more of that. All of the times of history when there's crisis, what comes out of it is new solutions, new ways of doing things and services and products. And we're seeing a lot of that as well. And some of our clients talking about some of the learns they're getting from that. I love the collaboration that's going on personally. We see it in our industry where people who would normally charge £1,000 to come to a conference for a day, are now giving that content away free in virtual sessions. We're seeing it in the medical profession at the moment in terms of the need to collaborate, but actually the willingness and appetite to collaborate. And I think, just going back to your question, particularly Rachel, with your background, what this experience is teaching us, whether we want to be taught it or not, are some new habits. So it's a bit like, going to the gym, it's a new piece of equipment. We've been practicing with that new piece of equipment or new way of working out for the last few months. And it may mean when we go back out to our front doors and start to kind of get back to life as close to as it was before, we might have forgotten some of our old training habits and some of, you know, how to use some of the equipment, but it will come back to us, as well as all these new habits and new skills that we have had this opportunity to kind of pick up to. So they're kind of some of the other things. I mean, for me as well, I think we just, even more so now, I think we talked about it as a team last week, that we were starting to get to that Zoom fatigue. And that's unfair to pick on Zoom because it's really any tool out there. But that, for me personally, that boundary between my work and my personal life, because as Simone said, you know, I have a few nights a week, I do virtual kind of quizzes or virtual wine bars with different groups of people. So I feel connected with individuals, but I'm always in front of the same screen. So for me, that boundary between work and non-work is even more blurred now. And I do need to make much more of a conscious effort of maybe even going to a different room and taking out a tablet and kind of doing Zoom on the tablet with friends. So at least there's some movement and physical change of environment, so I can start to separate work from personal activity. And they're things that I think people are starting to talk about now. And understanding, you know, what does that mean for how our behaviours have changed, the elements of those behaviours we'd want to continue and actually probably do a little bit more of, and those elements that I think people might have been okay with during this period, but actually will very quickly want to kind of drop as habits and kind of get back to some.
And Project X, it doesn't just focus on organizations' culture. As we've started to talk about, it's also about people. Do you think there is a particular sort of personality or type of person that is going to help businesses survive as we start to transition out? And Simone, you were nodding there. Do you feel like you've got something to, yeah?
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
I think it's not a type of person. I think it's two things what people kind of look for. One is the mindset. So the mindset, and we talked this a little bit about the mindset of kind of to do, you know, adapt, flexible, less ego. I want to learn, I want to experiment, you know, somehow. So I think that's a mindset. I think people who probably are more in that flexible to do ongoing learning mindset, for them it's easier to adapt than others. And then the other one is more capabilities. And I think the shift, and this is a shift which has been before as 19 came, the shift from actually knowledge towards more the adaptability to things. So accept the unexpected, curiosity, innovation, collaborate with others, not only look at yourself. Those type of capabilities are critical. Because you can learn. We heard from Marian, there are so many courses out there. We've done lots of upskilling. You can always learn, yeah. But being in those kind of, you know, knowing we are living in an uncertain world and be able to kind of navigate yourself through this uncertain world, I think that will be more and more crucial. And not only in this crisis, I think this was already there before, but it has been actually, I always think it had been put the light on it. And that is scary, you know, it is scary, but I think you can train that. You can train those capabilities like you can train anything else. So I think that's the ones. And then, yeah, people who like have be big, and one of the things when you guys, when Rachel, you and Marian were talking, my thinking was also, it is important that we are being conscious about our thoughts in that perspective. I think what this crisis has brought up is actually understanding ourselves better, where our risk appetite is, where we feel uncomfortable, and share that, because normally we would not share that. And I think that's the piece in sharing with our colleagues, with our teams, as a leader, be able to facilitate that conversation that helps you understand actually your business and how you can bring your business forward in this time and in any future uncertainty.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely agree with everything Simone's listed there, and probably they were always skills and capabilities that have been required. I think what COVID has done for us is highlighting the experience, and it's a collective experience that we're all having with it. So it's really important more than ever to be kind of human-centric. but other kind of, and it's not about a type of person, as Simone was saying, it's skills and capabilities. So, you know, having a curious mind, asking questions, being open, you know, listening, good open questions and listening to what people have to say. Probably more than ever, leveraging networks and reaching out and getting different perspectives from people. And that kind of ongoing opportunity to collaborate and network. I mean, those people who don't have those skills will also, you know, be successful and will survive this. But to your question, who are the ones that are more likely to thrive in this? And also those ones that are willing to innovate and create and try different things. And, you know, we talk about in Agile about creating minimal viable products. So instead of looking for that kind of golden solution to something, I think this experience has given people that real case study. I mean, you couldn't create this simulation in a classroom scenario, no matter how hard you tried, and it's too real. But that kind of idea of trying something, let's, you know, it's not perfect, but let's give it a go. Let's see what we learn from it. Let's iterate it. Let's build on it. And having kind of everybody, your client, your colleagues, everybody involved in that process. So those kind of skills of engaging people in that and being brave to experiment, I think are also really important.
Marian, do you think that people will actually remember what they've learned during this time and remember to put them in place as sort of long-term changes as everything starts to kind of, as the world starts spinning as we saw it before?
It's a great question. I'll give you, I would hope that we'd, you know, because we've learned these new skills, and we've had plenty of practice. Like if it had only been a week or 2 weeks, maybe I think we probably would have quickly have forgotten them. But because it's been a lot longer, a lot of it has got into our memory muscle in a new way. I think certainly for managers and leaders of people who probably come from much more of a command and control leadership style, have had to relinquish some of that control and empower and needing to empower the people and build up trust. So I think some of those behaviors managers will, we exist because we've been asked to coach people like that for years to help them understand that these are the skills that will help them be successful. And this then has given them a real life example of applying that. And I think that those kind of skills will definitely be more conscious in their ways of working and become, you know, a natural way of working for them, hopefully in the future. I think certainly things around technology and the use of technology will only enhance, you know, as great as all of the tools are that we've mentioned, you know, a lot of them don't integrate very well. So it kind of gets a bit clunky. You know, we all need to practice our exit Zoom face, because I love that when everyone's looking at the screen, looking for the, how do you get out of this? How do you, leave this meeting? And everyone's searching for where that button is. So some of the, some of the humor and some of the kind of fun factor, I think people will take away. All that said, there is going to be such a drains up or a retrospective or a review of everything. I mean, I hope we don't get into analysis paralysis on it. But I think there's going to be a lot of great case studies, a lot of analysis that will come out of the back of this, that as individuals we'll be able to look at, and as organizations and as countries, I think we'll get a lot of learns from it. And each time we've gone through a crisis globally, and I think the last big one that certainly had a global impact was 2008, when the markets crashed really badly, is we learned a lot. And from those learns, we then, in society, we start to evolve and improve on processes, bring in better, tools and controls and skills to, safeguard us from that again in the future. And at the personal side of me, things that I do think that, given we had so much in society leading up to this about the environment, around corporate social responsibility, as we move forward, there's going to be a lot of analysis and findings that's going to come out of this that I think will change some of our collective habits around protecting the environment and taking more greater corporate social responsibility. So again, maybe that's my list to Santa. I don't know how realistic it is, but that's kind of where I come out on it, and it changes every day. Going back to your question, who's going to cope with this? People who love change and who can cope well with ambiguity. And I love that because it's all about learning and kind of adapting as I move forward.
And I think if I can add a different aspect on this is also around people start kind of like, I see this more in continental Europe at the moment, that people start actually kind of to ask their businesses and say, you know, it worked. You always told us we can't work from home, right? Actually, in this crisis, we actually showed we can. And so there are demands for businesses now to work different from staff or from clients, right? So businesses who had not been on this digitalization for whatever reason are forced, I think, now because they had to, you know, provide a service. So I think that dynamic will be interesting to see how that kind of moves things further. And certainly what I heard people said, you know, this had helped while it's really difficult to have family and everybody at home and you have to work. It actually helped people to understand, well, I can do this. I can work from home, not maybe slightly different, you know, circumstances, but I can do it. And it helped me. It saved me 2 hours a day, or it helped me even longer than that of not going into a big city.
So we know we have an audience today, and I do have a question, and I'll hand this one to you, Simone. How much more or less important is purpose to keep organizations culturally intact and to ensure that working patterns, shifts, working from home, etc., don't break down culture, but actually enhance it?
Very good question. As I said before, what we've seen the last five weeks, after the 5-week break, we've been asked much more to facilitate around strategy, brand, identity, purpose. So that all goes into the same strategic, you know, the strategic area. Purpose is really important. And also a little bit of when you say, oh, you need to look at your purpose, business leaders most like, we actually have a business purpose, but I think it is absolutely critical, because what this crisis has done is actually looking into the eye of a lot of businesses. What is their purpose? And are they actually knowing what their client need? Do they, you know, what kind of processes did they look into to help their clients to get what they need? So purpose is really critical, but I think there is a rethink to be done how you want to fulfill this purpose, because as you said in the question, the patterns, the ways of working, the working from home, that can also be changed, right? So for example, the purpose of a business can be to serve a certain client, but it can be now with actually employee working from home. The critical point is to kind of make sure how you bring your teams together, and you can do that through facilitated session like on Zoom or on other in other ways. And I've read a couple of articles, plus also people kind of started to say, you know, we don't need to have a location anymore. We will work from home now, and we will meet from time to time when we can do that again in certain venues, and we'll kind of do our work there as a collective. So there are models out there now. People are thinking, experimenting, how much do we actually need to be in a set kind of environment, in a location next to a desk, but because we can, through the ability to kind of work virtually, you can actually kind of create something. I mean, I've worked 20 years ago, I worked on an international platform with people from Brazil to Australia, and I still have contacted with them. Never seen them, but you know, we built via online such a good connection. You are able to do that, and I think that's a big learning. So coming back to the purpose, I think it's really critical. I think every business at this point should have the discussion: is our purpose still the right one? If that is the right one, what are we going to do about that? And are the processes, the way we operate, the ways of working, are they still the right ones to fulfill our purpose. So that thought process and that strategic thought process is really critical. And we've been facilitating quite a lot around that. And I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the conversations, as Simone said, we're starting to have now, because culture is something that's organic and it evolves, and it is important to check in as circumstances change. You know, organizations, large organizations, small organizations will probably have to go back and revisit their strategies, and make some changes. You know, they won't have had the revenue income streams from this year, so they may need to reprioritize some of their activities. You know, we will see layoffs in organizations as well, and that's going to force potentially different ways of working and a lot more cross-skilling of people in certain roles. This opportunity is given people, as they've had to Simone's point earlier on, kind of multitask and share knowledge and roles for the last few weeks and months, is to, you know, they may want to do more of that going forward. So culture is something that's always evolving and changing, and this is going to be important. I think it's just being careful not to force it. So there is still so many unknowns, and every company, every country, even within large countries, and we've seen that across the United Kingdom already in the last 24 hours, you know, differences in how different regions want to approach the exit of this lockdown. And therefore that means, you know, there needs to be a little bit more of a localized and regional conversation with people for the foreseeable future. But certainly some of the advice is helping some of our clients pace that conversation, and not jump ahead to what they think the answer is, but actually look at the process for how they're engaging their clients or how they're engaging their colleagues or their communities and industries in having that conversation around realigning purpose. But the need for purpose is going to be even greater, and I suspect there'll be a few leaders who will have, through this experience, have developed the vulnerability and the kind of emotionally driven language to be able to have a much more authentic and emotion driven, human centric driven purpose conversation, as opposed to just bottom line results.
And Marian, I know your slogan at Project X is "We are the people and culture specialists." With such expertise in mind, what lasting advice would you like to close our chat on today?
Oh, where to start? So many pieces of advice. I think ultimately, if Rachel, as you know, if we were having this conversation, you and me over a coffee, and you would ask that question, I think it's around, okay, you know, what can I do to help? Where can I help you? It's around listening to, you know, what's going on for you at the moment, and just being present in that moment and being in the service of others, I think, is the most important thing we can do at the moment. We don't have the answers. I think it's going to be a co-creation of answers. What works for me, what works for Simone, is going to be very different, I would expect, to what would work for you. So it needs to be very much that human-centric, let's just have a conversation, let's figure out what we can do for the near future, and that could be the next few days or the next couple of weeks. Again, that will depend on what you want. So just be there for people, be kind, be in the service of each other, and support each other.
I can add from my side, I think I keep it more on the organizational level. So for you who are leaders in organization, my key advice is pause, right? Pause before you go further. So pause, see what happened as we discussed today, pause and see what of this, what you saw, it was painful, it's still painful, but what is actually good? What had brought you really some joy, or what was really good in your team, and take that and develop it further. So really use this time. So to kind of like really rethink and reboot in a way. Don't just think, oh, we're just going back as it was, because that would be a waste of the learning we at all had to do. And that's certainly my advice.
Yeah, actually, it's really true, Simone, because one of the things we haven't touched on is Agile has a value around kind of failing and learning from it. So failure is a good thing because we learn from it. And I'm not saying we're failing as we've gone through this experience, but it hasn't felt, we haven't been in our comfort zone. Things have been a little bit more challenging. So taking that pause, as Simone said, and kind of just sitting down and go, okay, what have we learned? What didn't work? What was it about that didn't work? Can we adjust it? Or actually now is we need to where focus or purpose is how we're going to go together. So it's definitely a take that time to kind of reflect back on it and keep iterating that as we go through the next few months as well.
Well, I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure others have as well. And thank you to you both, Simone and Marian, for sharing your advice today. I hope you both look after yourselves physically and mentally during these unusual times. And for people listening, please continue to donate to the NHS to also help us get through these very difficult times. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.